Thank you very much. Thank you, Hank. The answer is yes. In fact, I am currently in negotiations with Karen on this topic. I grew up, just to date myself a little bit, Hank, I grew up back, we had a mini bike. Graduated when I was 14. My three brothers and I got a Trail 70, if anybody knows. It's back when Honda just made motorcycles. And then we had a couple of Yamaha motorcycles, and then I met Karen, who said, "It's me or the bike." And so I chose her 26 years ago. And but I told her there's actually a bill of state law. I don't want to ride a motorcycle, but I think if we have the privilege of serving as governor, I think the state law requires it. And so back me up on that. We're excited about that. But Hank Millies, thank you for sponsoring this event. Thank you for your friendship. Thank you for your tremendous leadership at Meridian Services and all that it means to so many families in this region, and outstanding professional services. To Jim Riggle, thank you for leading the board and for your friendship over many years. And to I want to say, Jay, Julian, thank you for a great event. I'm a little humbled by the turnout today. When they asked me to speak, right after the 4th of July break, I thought, I might be a little bit of slim pickings in terms of the turnout. It kind of reminds me when I was running down, I was a little bit late, Jay, for a speech I gave down in Rushville not long ago. And we were running 20-30 minutes late, and I came rushing up to the auditorium, and the guy that invited me to speak was standing outside, kind of shuffling his feet, and I breezed past him, and I saw there were just 5 people down on the front row of the auditorium, and I turned to him, and I said, did you see there's just 5 people down there for my speech tonight? And he said, yes, sir, I've seen that. And I said, well, didn't you tell him I was the speaker? And he said, no, sir, but I'm going to find out who did. So those of you that didn't read the program before you came, those of you that did especially, thank you. Thank you for coming out during a holiday week. And there's other folks here I really appreciate. Tony Estep at Open Door has been a friend for many years, and appreciate her leadership, sponsorship today. And of course, I always tell people I want to be like Van Smith when I grow up, which may never actually occur, but a lot of times we don't take a minute to say a special thank you to the families that really personify what makes Muncie great, and Van and Margaret Smith are such a family, and it's an honor. Rich Moosty, who I had the privilege from Congress about a year ago of recognizing as an Indiana Small Business Person of the Year in 2010. Rich, we appreciate your energetic leadership at Unified Group Services, and knowing that that's receiving national recognition, it's an honor to be with you today. It's also a particular honor to be joined by some people that I just deeply respect in public service. I always like to tell people I was for Sharon McShirley before it was cool. And I just want to say, and this is not a political speech, but I deeply admire the leadership and the courage of Mayor Sharon McShirley, and we thank you for your leadership in this community. And I also want to acknowledge 2 very good friends who served this area with great distinction in this last session of the Indiana General Assembly. I think whatever your politics, I have to believe that when you look at a session like the likes of which we just had in Indianapolis, where we balance budgets, where we cut taxes for businesses, where we pass the most advanced education reform in the United States of America, I think we owe a debt of gratitude to State Senator Doug Eckerty and State Representative Bill Davis. And would you guys stand up? Really appreciate these men of integrity and these good friends of mine. I also want to make, before I get into my comments, and I'm going to share for a few minutes, and then Jay has encouraged me to maybe pass the microphone around and see what might be on your all's mind, and I'm delighted to do that. I also understand that we're operating under what I learned many years ago was kind of Rotary rules about time. went to my first Rotary speech back, literally back when I ran for Congress back in 1988, you know, and I'll never forget going into the Columbus Rotary, and I said, how long do you want me to speak? And they go, really, you know, you're a local guy, we really like you, I mean, you can talk as long as you want. And I said, really, great. He said, yeah, we're all leaving at 1. But so, I'm going to share with you for a few minutes and then take a few questions, but we'll get you out of here in a timely way. I want to talk about America's challenge. I want to talk about Indiana's opportunity. Because I think there's a nexus here that the business leaders in this room would do well to reflect on as we think about the debates that are going to take place on Capitol Hill in the next 3 weeks over spending discipline and reform, and then we also think about where Indiana is and what Indiana's on the verge of as we sit here today. And I'm going to share a few thoughts about that and why I think we've got a unique opportunity in the state of Indiana to embrace some transformative change, but also to be a part of leading the nation back. Before I do that, though, I did want to do one last commercial message. Kim Bennett is our Deputy District Director. She's here along with a number of other staffers. She's been running our Muncie office for as long as I've been your congressman. And would you just give her a round of applause? She just loves this community, does a beautiful job for us, but her Super Bowl every year is the job fair, which I promised her I would pitch to all of you. Right now, we've got more than 50 businesses that have confirmed are going to be with us on July the 22nd from 10 to 4 at Ball State's Worth Arena. If your business, and I've already talked to a couple of you that are in a hiring mode right now, if you would like to come and participate, it is a great venue. Kim, I think in the last several years we have drawn more than 1,000 job seekers from all over central Indiana that will come to the job fair, and any one of you or anyone who you can speak to who might want to give Kim a call at the Muncie office and plug into that. It is an enormously important tradition that predated my service as your congressman, but it's been a tradition we've been honored to build on, and Kim has done a super job. Again, that's July 22nd. It'll be here in Muncie at Ball State's Worth Arena, and the only thing we ask is that there's no fee for the booth space. We'll promote it very heavily that you're there. We just need you to give us a good faith commitment that you are hiring, or at least could be hiring in the foreseeable future, because we like to tell the men and women that are coming out that everybody you're talking to is looking right now. So put that in your pipe and keep it in mind, and give Kim a call if we can involve you in the job fair on July 22nd. Let me speak for just a few minutes on America's challenge, Indiana's opportunity. And let me acknowledge for a moment that as we talk about big issues and fiscal responsibility and reform in Washington, as we talk about progress in Indiana, we always should begin with recognizing that these are hard times in the neighborhood for an awful lot of Hoosiers. The reality is that we've got more than 8% unemployment in Indiana. National unemployment is higher. But as I've been traveling a little bit more than usual around the state of Indiana, what's clear to me is that the numbers don't even tell the tale. There may be 8% of people, 8.2 in Indiana, that are still showing up as unemployed, but an awful lot of Hoosiers have just quit looking for work. And a large number that we really don't have much a way to verify. But I've seen it, I've heard about it anecdotally, maybe you have too, Bill and Doug, is an awful lot of people have gone back to work making a whole lot less than they were making before. There's a term for it in the marketplace, underemployment. But we all know people who, 4 years ago were making $75,000 a year and supporting their family, and now they're working a job making $35,000 a year and trying to get some extra hours on the weekend. That's the reality. These are difficult times, and so when we talk about the challenges at the national level, when we talk about the opportunities in Indiana, I think we need to begin there. I think we need to begin with a clear-eyed recognition that as we see the stock market pop up and down, and there's positives and there's negatives and surveyed, the reality is a lot of people are hurting. And so what we do, we have to be clear about, we have to be thoughtful about, we have to recognize that we're in a very, very difficult time in the life of our state and the life of our nation for many. In Washington, D.C., the big debates you're going to hear about, I'll be off the plane this evening, and we'll be weighing in very heavily, are all about the issue of $14 trillion national debt. Do we raise the debt ceiling? And I will tell you that those of you who know, Jim and I were talking about it when he came out to Washington not long ago. Karen gave him a tour of the White House, and my wife is both the better looking and the smarter part of our family, so she does the books at our house. And I'll just tell you, there's a little personal anecdote. Sometimes, you know, maybe after Christmas or after a run of family birthdays, Karen will sit down with me and say, I got to go down to the bank, I got to get another $1,000 on the credit card. But I'm the backstop, I'm the accountability, that's my role. Mostly figurehead, powerless, but, you know, I'm like the King of England, Queen of England. But I say to her, she knows, she always knows that Dad's question to the family always is, what's the plan to get us back where we're supposed to be? We can do that, we can extend the credit card, but what's the plan? Because we got to get back to the family budget. And that's how we've made our way 26 years and lived within our means. And to me, I bring no other attitude to this debate over the debt ceiling. You know, if you owe debts, pay debts. I mean, the United States of America has incurred debts beyond our borrowing authority. And we've got to pay them. We've got to figure out a way to pay them. And I'm not, despite all evidence to the contrary, folding my arms and saying I will never vote for an increase in the debt ceiling. I have voted against increasing the debt ceiling before. I have voted for increasing the debt ceiling before. But for me, it's always about where's the plan? What's the plan for getting us back? And I think the antidote for what ails this country fiscally is a combination of cutting spending now in this fiscal year, far beyond the recent debate over some 40 billion turned 20 billion turned 10 billion in cuts. But I mean real and meaningful. Probably if we're going to be serious about it, we probably got to sharpen our pencils and find about $100 to $150 billion in savings in this fiscal year. That would be step one. That would send a deafening message to capital markets that we're serious and we're actually looking at really trimming our sails. Frankly, the way this mayor is done. I mean, if you want to know whether or not people in positions of authority are actually trimming their sails, check the front page of the paper. Okay, because it happens. If you want, you know, in Indianapolis, General Assembly's been the same way. But if you're not reading about it, if you're not reading people concerned about it, it's probably not really happening. And it hasn't really been happening in Washington. So step one is going to be we're going to have to cut spending now in real and meaningful ways. Number two is I'm also advocating that we change the way we spend the people's money. I think the time has come for us to pass a statutory cap on spending, the likes of which we haven't seen since the days of Graham Rudman. That would mean the Congress, the House, and the Senate would pass legislation that would say spending would be limited on an annual basis to this level, and if Congress doesn't hit that mark, it automatically is reduced. The President signs that, it becomes law. It's not a rule of the House, it's law. And I think the time has come for us to take another swing at that. Lastly, I think it's time for us to send a balanced budget amendment to the Constitution down to the states for ratification. I really believe it with all my heart. And not just a balanced budget amendment that says that Washington needs to balance the federal budget, but one that also limits federal spending to, my proposal from 2 years ago was 1/5 of GDP. Since World War II, men and women, the United States national government has required of all of us, on average, about 18% of GDP. Right now it's pushing 25%. Literally, in two successive administrations under two different political parties, we've seen the percentage of our economy being consumed by the national government increase dramatically. And I think we need to pass a balanced budget amendment that also says you get 20 cents on the dollar from the American people, and you all need to figure out, I mean, we built the freest, most prosperous nation in the history of the world on 20 cents on the dollar, on average, since World War II. And we ought to be able to continue to do that in the 21st century. That's the vision that we have. And I've got an op-ed I'm going to be working on a plane later today entitled, you know, what would be wrong with letting states decide? I mean, send to the members of the Indiana General Assembly a balanced budget amendment. There's still a, you know, it will take a supermajority of states to ratify it. It could take many years to ratify it, but I really do believe after fighting runaway federal spending in Washington, D.C., under the other party, under my own party, I really do believe the time has come for us to engage that agency of our national government, which is the Constitution of the United States, in standing with the American people to demand that we have a government that lives within our means. So that's the opportunity that we have. And you might say, well, Mike, you were just talking about jobs, and now you're talking about fiscal discipline and statutory caps and a balanced budget amendment. What relationship is there to jobs? Well, I think it's directly related, for the reason that they'll be nodding in the room when I say this. Businesses across this state, businesses across this country have a lot of money on the sidelines. The truth is, in terms of public corporations that disclose their cash reserves, there's about $2 trillion sitting on the sidelines. $2 trillion could be invested in Muncie and opening up another factory. $2 trillion that could be invested in real estate construction and housing. And it's just sitting on the sidelines. And I think it's sitting on the sidelines because of uncertainty. I think uncertainty is the enemy of prosperity. And the greatest uncertainty is, what on earth is the federal government going to do next? And are they ever going to get spending under control? And so I really believe that if we took a decisive step toward fiscal responsibility and reform, that would do more to free up trillions of dollars in sidelined assets in this country than almost anything else Washington, D.C. could do. Now, I also believe we should embrace traditional policies of growth, sound money, tax reform, regulatory reform, push back against this effort to do cap and trade through regulatory policy. I'm hoping against hope that the Supreme Court of the United States will find the individual mandate at the heart of their health care reform legislation unconstitutional, so we can repeal that legislation and start over with health care reform that will focus on lowering the cost of health insurance instead of growing the size of government. But everything begins with fiscal discipline. And we can add to that the practices, the policies of growth, regulatory reform, tax reform, expanded trade, but it all begins there. And so I really think that's America's challenge right now. America's challenge is to recognize, and I got a chuckle out of this. I was in Sullivan, Indiana over the weekend, and I said, and there was a storied basketball coach down there who's retired. And I said, Coach, it ain't different than any of those great teams you took to state finals. For Washington, D.C., everything starts with discipline. When you get the team together, just get them in shape. That's where it all starts. And I think that's why this moment, this challenge that we have at the national level, is such an extraordinarily important moment in the life of the nation. And it will contribute directly to the economic vitality of Muncie, of Delaware County, of East Central Indiana, the state as a whole, and the country as a whole. Doesn't mean it's going to be easy. Doesn't mean it isn't going to be a little bit loud and banging some fenders out there like NASCAR, but at the end of the day, I want you to think about the opportunity that we have. Again, let's meet our nation's obligations. If we have to raise the debt ceiling to do that, let's do it, but let's marry that with the kind of reforms that fundamentally will change the fiscal direction of our country. Which leads me to Indiana's opportunity. I mean, it is extraordinary to me because Indiana, by example, is already leading the way back to where Washington, D.C. should be headed right now. I mean, believe it or not, Indiana, we just found out a couple weeks ago, and I give great credit to the best governor in America, Mitch Daniels, and the best state legislature in America, but Indiana just found out that we were the third fastest growing economy of all 50 states in 2010. Extraordinary. And we knew that our unemployment rate was a little bit lower than the national rate, but in 2010 we had the third fastest growing economy. The only ones better were North Dakota and New York that were growing at a more rapid rate. And our growth rate was 4.6%. The national growth rate was 2.6%. Now, I will tell you that the chief reason for that, I think, is a combination of two things. Number one is fiscal responsibility in Indiana. Indiana's put their fiscal house in order, and they've been turning heads around the country. People are saying, wow, well, if I'm making a decision, where are we going to locate a new business, a new factory, or invest in health services or logistics? Do I want to go to a state that has property tax caps, so that's predictable? They've also got their fiscal house in order, so I've got some predictability about what my tax load and burden might be. Also, I think a big part of that is that Indiana has leaned into the fight in the last 6 years on economic development. A lot of people in this room, Mike Lunsford here, chief among them, a lot of people involved in the chamber have made these trips. I know the mayor's gone around the world telling the story about Muncie and about this community. But this is a governor I'll never forget. Right after we found out that Honda made the decision to go to Greensburg, Indiana, And the good news in the last couple of weeks is Honda decided to open up a second shift, another 1,000 jobs in that community, just a little south of my hometown. But I'll never forget, I was talking to some of the Honda executives at the grand opening. Remember that, it's a big rainy day down there, if you were down there building Honda. And I said, tell me why you came to Indiana. And he said, the national chairman and CEO was there. And he said through an interpreter, he said, we called Ohio and Ohio called us back. He said, we called Illinois and Illinois called us back. We called Indiana and that governor came to Japan. You can applaud that if you want. I think that's a great way to go. Honestly, there's something in Asian culture called face. It's the best way we can translate it. But the ability to go and show, it's one of the reasons why it's important to have local officials get on the airplane and go to the other part of the world, is when you go and you show basic respect. You have respect returning, you have interest returning. Here our governor was, who just dropped everything and said, boom, we're going over, we're going to say, how do we do this deal? And so I think Indiana's success in the recent years, as we begin to turn this economy around, is a result of fiscal responsibility and promotion. But what gets me really excited, just as a Hoosier, not as a candidate, I'm not here doing a stump speech, I'm really not. But I would just tell you, what gets me very excited is the opportunity to build on that foundation of fiscal responsibility and reform, and education reform, because people need to understand, if we're not succeeding in the classroom, you're not going to succeed in the marketplace. I mean, Mayor, how many times have you heard that talk? Business looks at the community and says, talk to me about your educational attainment, talk to me about your vocational training, what are we looking for in terms of, if we're going to come there, what's your workforce? Okay, so the education reform legislation is not only the right thing to do to make sure every kid in Indiana gets a great education, but it's also directly related to economic development. But you build on that fiscal discipline, government reform, education reform, policies of growth that really focus on where Indiana's strengths lie. And we were talking upstairs a minute ago. You look at the strengths of our economy. Indiana has not that it'd be any surprise in Muncie, but I didn't know this was still true until I kind of did a deep dive on some of the data. Indiana has the highest percentage of manufacturing jobs of any state in the union, still. Highest percentage of manufacturing jobs of any state in the union. And yet, how many people walking up and down, Walnut will say, well, that's the old economy. Old economy. That's 25% of our economy in Indiana, and probably more than 50% of our GDP. Chris Lamoth back there knows from back in his days, state chamber. I mean, Indiana's a manufacturing state. Our assets in healthcare services in this state are second to none. In the life sciences, second to none. You throw in our higher education system, logistics, a burgeoning defense contracting industry. Katie barred the door. Indiana's got a story to tell, and if we embraced, it seems to me, well, if I have a chance to talk to Bill, and we'll talk about it someday, I will. There are some pro-growth policies Indiana could advance on top of what we have done, which has been terrific, that could put the state into overdrive, where people like Mayor McShirley are doing a lot more answering the phone than making calls. Where people like Lunsford over here people are calling them up saying, hey, how can you solve my problem, because I've got to come there, because we want to expand the line, we want to expand our business. I mean, we've got a story to tell in Indiana, and to me, that's why I said when I was preparing my remarks this morning, America's challenge really translates into Indiana's opportunity, because Indiana has already done what the national government should be doing. Now, we have an opportunity literally to create a higher quality of life, more good paying jobs, great schools, safe streets, strong families, and on top of that, really lead the country back. And be an example to the country of when you practice what you preach about fiscal responsibility and growth, then stand back, because America still works. The last source of my confidence about Indiana is a little more personal, and I'll go to your questions. And that is, I really do believe that Hoosiers are the best people in America. Over the last 10 years, I've done a fair amount of traveling around the country in one role or another. And it's not just that Hoosiers are nicer than other people, but they are. They just are. All right. just come visit me in Washington for a week, and you'll know it. But there's a decency, there's a goodness, there's a caring about people. I saw it, I've been reflecting, we just had the 3rd anniversary of this extraordinary flood in Columbus, Indiana, that was on June 7th, 3 years ago. And a lot of you, in addition to being involved in the chamber, are involved in Muncie Rotary. And Muncie Rotary, just dropped everything. Dropped everything and organized and headed to Columbus and helped families put their lives back together. And I can get emotional about this real quick. I mean, there were thousands of homes that were destroyed, in 4 feet of water. And like a police officer told me the day afterwards, when we were driving through the neighborhood, where everybody's pulling all the stuff out of their houses, piling them. Some of you were there. He said to me, Mike, the only thing you couldn't find in this neighborhood an hour after the floodwaters receded was a parking space. And I said, what do you mean? He said, well, people just came from everywhere. Just came from everywhere. I mean, loaded up, bottles of water in the back, trunks of the car, toolboxes. I mean, there's a goodness, there's a decency, there's a charity, there's a right priorities about the people of Indiana that I believe is the reason why people are looking at Indiana today. It's the reason why businesses are looking at Indiana today. They sense it, they know it, they know this is a unique place to live and work and raise a family and run a business. And probably lastly, it was not ever more in high relief to me than a couple of weeks ago. The mayor and I had the privilege, along with others who were here, of mourning with those who mourn and grieving with those who grieve. And when we reached out to the family of our fallen firefighter, Scott Davis, we just wanted to make sure to pay an appropriate tribute to a man, to a family, and to a tragedy that hadn't happened in this community for more than 50 years. And I have to tell you, though, when I came up to Muncie that day for the memorial service, I think I was expecting an event where people would come out. I was not expecting what I had. And those of you who were here at the Verizon Center that day know that it was just, it was amazing. Not only to see the extraordinary turnout of men and women in the firefighting community from all over the state of Indiana and points around the country who came here to stand with that family. But more poignant to me was just seeing the everyday visitors that made their way to the Verizon Center or made their way to the services the night before to just come in and pay their respects. There's a sense of the character of the people in Indiana in that moment that I don't think I have to explain, because I can tell by the looks on your faces everybody gets. And it's a specialness, it's a uniqueness about Indiana. People care here. We have our disagreements, and occasionally they're pretty strong. Hoosiers don't hide our opinions, but there's a goodness, there's a decency, there's a character, there's a compassion about the people of Indiana that I think is the real foundation of the opportunity that we have in Muncie and Delaware County and all over the state of Indiana to build an even better tomorrow. So thank you very much. It's an honor to be with you today. It's just the greatest honor in my life to represent you in Washington, D.C.